Mr. Topher Field!
Joining me now is that inspiring and brave Australian documentary filmmaker, Topher Field.
Melbourne, my home. What unfolded here shocked the world and caused many to wonder what happened to Australia. In the middle of it all were ordinary people, people like us. My name is Topher Field. I'm the director of Battleground Melbourne.
Topher is on a mission to empower people.
The only thing that limits government power is the limit of our obedience.
But we realized a deeper truth, that good people break bad laws.
Moral cowardice is the great scourge of our time.
We're here to take back the freedoms that were earned for us by the people that we built this shrine to remember.
This was a military checkpoint. They had the army on these checkpoints. And without irony, saying, papers, please. Our boys in blue wouldn't obey a government tyranny. Excuse me, they will.
Yes.
I understood that my arrest was coming, and I by then I was on the verge of a breakdown.
Hi everyone, Rukshan here, and quick video to alert you to the arrest of Topher Field.
The problem with Australians is not that so many of them are descended from convicts, but that so many are descended from prison officers.
I went as far on one occasion as to saying, yeah, you're absolutely right, I'm inciting. I'm inciting people to exercise their human rights.
And I will accept nothing less than freedom. Freedom for me, freedom for my children, and freedom for us all.
Well, good evening and welcome to another Topher Field podcast. There's a bunch of you piling in already. Some of you must have been waiting for the show to start tonight. Swanee actually got in very early, got in at 3:44 p.m. today with the very first comment of the evening. G'day, Swanee. Hope you've joined us for the live already. Jared, thank you for the support for following us both. My guest tonight, for those that may not know, is Craig Kelly, the MP who, of course, became infamous or famous, depending on your perspective, for actually telling the truth. I know, shock horror, in Parliament, and was censured for doing so. Censored online and then censured by the Parliament. We'll get into all of that. Well, actually, we'll probably only get into a little bit of that because really tonight's focus is actually we're talking about men's mental health. G'day, John. Michael, always a pleasure to have you joining us. Tinker, lovely to see you. Tim, I will see you on Saturday. Now, for those that may not be aware, I am the MC of an event that's happening in Mansfield on Saturday, starting at 1 p.m. We'll be at the Botanic Gardens in Mansfield. And this is a rally. I'm not organising the rally. They've just asked me to MC, but it's a cause that I very much support and something that really I've actually been touching on for my entire time, 15 years now as a political commentator. And that is the right of all Australians to be able to use Australia's natural resources, including the bush. So what this particular rally is about the fact that yet another massive swathe of beautiful Australian countryside is under threat of being locked up and turned into yet another national park, locking people out. No hunting, no fishing, no forward driving, no camping. All that stuff will be done. And I don't think that's right. Sorry, guys, I don't know what my camera's doing. That's really weird. So we need to make sure that the government knows that they can't do this to us and that we're not going to take this lying down. So I'll be with Tim and a bunch of others in Mansfield, 1 p.m. at the Mansfield Botanic Gardens. So join me there. I'm on the road again. I've had to switch from my phone because those of you that are regular viewers will remember the audio issues that I've been having with my phone. So I've switched to my laptop and clearly the camera is not up to the job. So I apologize for that. But those of you that are listening later on to the podcast after it's come out, this isn't going to bother you guys, so you're in luck in this case. So hello everyone. Hello Claire. Oh goodness, yes. There's literally dozens of comments have piled in already. Linda, see you Saturday. Ian, good to see you here. And John, absolutely beautiful Mansfield. If you haven't been to Mansfield, then do yourself a favor and get there. Chris, good to see you. All right. I want to preface today a little bit because we're going to be talking about a really personal issue. And Craig and I have talked about this already. And this is essentially a no holds barred conversation about men's mental health. Talking to, between two people who have experienced some mental health challenges, and we're not shy about talking about that. And the other thing to keep in mind tonight is we're not coming to you as people who are talking about historic things and issues and challenges that we've overcome. We're coming to you in real time partway through that journey. And it's just an important thing to keep in mind as we talk. We're not sitting here pretending to be experts. We're not giving you advice or counseling you or anything like that. We're just two blokes that have had a pretty tough couple of years, as I know many of you have as well. And we think it's important that we talk about it. And we think that it's important that we invite you into that conversation to be a part of that. So what I'm going to do just quickly is I'm going to bring up a post that I actually made earlier today. I was just thinking through tonight, and I ended up writing this post. And I want to put it out there as essentially the premise for tonight. The post is false binaries are destroying us from within. Men versus women, black versus white, environment versus economy, rich versus poor, old versus young. By falsely claiming something as a zero-sum game, a binary where only one side wins, we create conflict where we fight to tear each other down because we falsely believe that that's how we win. Feminism is no longer about building women up, it's about tearing men down. Race baiters no longer believe in Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of equality, they campaign for reverse racism. The Greens no longer care about nature, they care about stopping industry and reducing economic activity. We're so jealous of the rich that we miss the fact that poor people in the West today are the richest poor people in history. Young people are told that they're being held down by old people who are above them, but really young people stand on the shoulders of the old, and we enjoy countless blessings that exist only because of the blood, sweat, and tears of the older generations. It's such a simple trick. Turn an addition into a subtraction, and everyone will turn on each other. We need to flip the script. It's addition, not competition. It's not men versus women in a race to the bottom. It's men plus women in an effort to build us all up. The same is true in every area. Black plus white, economy plus environment, rich plus poor, old plus young. Let's build each other up, bless each other, cheer each other on, and we'll all be better off together. So that's what I wrote earlier today as I was musing and considering what we were doing tonight and what I was going to be discussing with Craig. And I hope that makes sense to you. Essentially, what I really want to bring out of that is Craig and I are going to talk a lot about men's mental health. We're going to talk about our own experience as men. This is not to diminish the experiences of women. This is not an exclusive, our situation is worse than yours, I'll pity us. That's not where we're coming from. This is about understanding a side of life. I mean, nearly half the population is men. I think it's just under half is men. And I don't think this gets talked about enough. So if you want to jump in with comments, but what about women? Well, yes, we know. Okay, we know. We're not excluding that tonight. We're just talking about this side of things because I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not a woman. And I did double check this morning. So I can't really talk a lot about women's mental health from a firsthand experience, but I can talk about men's. Okay, so without further ado, let's get Craig on, shall we? It's been a couple of weeks in the making, but here we are, finally, ladies and gentlemen, Craig Kelly. Craig, how are you?
Yeah, great to be with you, Topher. In good spirits up here in Sydney tonight.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're in good spirits because I believe you're all going to be freezing, or we're all going to be freezing over the weekend. It's that global warming.
Well, I remember about a month ago, the Bureau of Meteorology predicted it was going to be the hottest ever winter, they said, and throw away your jackets. As soon as I saw that from the Bureau of Meteorology, I said, well, I'm going out to buy a new warm jacket. I might get it on special. And there you go. I saw the other, was it in Adelaide, they had the coldest morning, it was in 100 years or something like that.
Something like that. They're talking snow down to 700 meters and below. It's quite remarkable. And we're talking about mental health, and my first real exposure to there was some stuff in my childhood, in my 20s. There was someone that I knew. But besides that, I began exploring the issue of mental health when I was supporting farmers and talking about access to irrigation water and the impact that the Murray-Darling Basin Authority and the Water Act of 2007 had on farmers and irrigators. And I did a video in 2019 essentially talking about farmer suicide and talking about, and that's a primarily male industry, and therefore the suicides from it are primarily a male mental health issue. And seeing the Bureau of Meteorology get these predictions so horribly wrong, as a city person, it's inconvenient. Oh no, I didn't bring a brolly because the Bureau got it wrong. As a farmer, you make really crucial decisions off that information, and the impact when you've got a Bureau of Meteorology that's just so compromised is terrible, Craig.
Look, I'll give you an example. I think at the start of last year, I was keen to go and see the Sydney weather station. It's at a place at Observatory Hill. It's sort of like off the beaten track. You've sort of got to go up a bit of a sort of a hill. It's a hidden place in the middle of the city. I was always very keen to go and see where it was, sort of thing. During the holidays, there wasn't much happening in early January. This is last year, and I thought I'll go for a drive into the city and just have a look at it. And I've sort of found it. So yeah, that's not a really great position. It's that'll record height because it's next to an old stone house. Now I've looked over I put my iPad and I've lifted up because you couldn't see over the fence to see what I said. And they had a solar panel 6 meters behind the Stevenson screen, which is there, the white livered box, which has the temperature at the perfect angle to reflect the afternoon sun in the light of the Stevenson screen. It was just like, it is against every other principle of meteorology. It had been done deliberately to try and artificially increase the temperatures in Sydney in that year from someone at the Bureau of Meteorology, hidden behind a fence they thought no one would see. Just, the malfeasance in that organisation and how they've been hiding records, the excuses that they've come up with, the data tampering that they do. But you're right. It's the farmers. I know was it Elders, the pastoral organisation said that they reckon they suffered the significant losses because of the faulty forecasts of the Bureau of Meteorology. And it always seems to be. It's always going to be warmer than what it actually is. And there's always going to be less rain than what it actually is. That's how they have sort of these climate alarmism biases built into every forecast.
Yeah, they're always and only wrong in one direction, which I think tells us a little bit about what's going on. I'm getting now an internet speed warning. I'm out in a fairly remote area, so just bear with us, guys. If the internet does break up a little bit, I apologize. I've been on the road for a while, and I'm still on the road, and therefore I don't have all the usual gear that I would have. So I think what's probably worth starting with, Craig, I've been thinking all day about how do we talk about this in a way. I interviewed just a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed a funeral director, and of course it's a tough topic. And on the one hand, as an interviewer, I want to really do a good interview and talk about everything. On the other hand, I've also got to be mindful of the kinds of people that are listening and watching and the various situations that would be represented amongst the people that are observing. So I think where I want to start today, Craig, is can you tell us a little bit about your situation outside of politics, your family situation, and who is Craig the human being? Yeah, look, I'm glad to have this talk. I know there's a lot of people out there that are really suffering after COVID and what happened since. And I always think that the more you can hear other people's experience and what they've been through, and then you realise, hang on a minute, I'm not on my lonesome. I'm not on my Pat Malone. There's many people that have felt this way, sort of thing. Look, I grew up in a middle class family. We lived southern suburbs of Sydney, a place called Peakhurst. We grew up, what used to be opposite an old rubbish tip, which was called tip. And as one of our great activities on the weekend is all the kids in the street. We go across to that rubbish tip and go rummaging through stuff and sort of cart it home, across the street. And the tip was basically at the houses across the road. They backed onto the rubbish tip, and that was our fun sort of weekend. But we had a great childhood sort of thing. Went to the local public school and local high school, local primary school. Had a great time. Loved my cricket and played cricket for the local club, and loved my rugby, and ended up. I loved my cricket more than my rugby, but rugby was the one I was probably a little bit better at. So I played down there at St George, and then Southern Districts for a number of years in first division, first grade rugby. Yeah, right. That was a great time of my life, sort of thing. I worked, with my father. We had a small family business. We were manufacturing decorative lighting, of all things. They had a lampshade manufacturing place. So I've been through seeing hundreds of small little subcontractors that we had. We used to deal with wood turners and metal spinners and metal polishers and people casting brass and people working in ceramics and resin, and they've all gone. They're all dead. They're all out of business. So we've been through the thing where the manufacturing industry was decimated, from the Chinese. And then I decided I got interested in politics. What initially got me interested in was competition law, or as they
talk about as in the US as antitrust law.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed that the US, that was considered the home of the free market, had all these antitrust law provisions that we didn't have in Australia. And people say, why is the Australian market so concentrated? Why are there only 2 and 3 players, dominating each sector of the market? It's because of the small size. Well, no, it's not. It's because of the deliberate settings of our competition policy compared to the US.
Okay.
I could see historically how that was so important, not only to the economy but society. And that's originally what got me involved in politics. I thought the Liberal Party were doing during the John Howard period, they did a lot of good. I thought the one area that they were weak in is they lost focus on their small business constituency. And that's the reason why I sort of put my hand up to run. I somehow fluked my way getting pre-selection for the Cedar Hughes down in the southern part of Sydney. People said to me, what faction are you in, sort of thing. I said, hang on, the Liberal Party has factions? This is how much I knew. I said, what do you mean? How do you tell what faction we're in? I didn't even know that the Liberal Party had factions when I first put my hand up to run, sort of thing. So I was on a very, very, very steep learning curve, and somehow managed to weave my way through, a spider's web of, and I got the pre-selection for Cedar Hughes, and I was successful in 4 elections. I didn't. Yeah. And then we came to the COVID period, and I was in a position where, I through my life, I'd always sort of thought about what are the really bad things that could happen. What are the potential things that could go really, really wrong in society. One was obviously a nuclear war, or warfare was one.
Sure.
That was always a potential possibility. The other one was a rerun of the bubonic plague or the Spanish flu. That was always a great potential. Remember the Spanish flu? There were fit and healthy people in their their 30s. They were fit and healthy, and dead in the afternoon. Yeah, and that was always a possibility. We've been through the SARS scare in China. I've been actually. It's funny enough, I've been traveling in China during that SARS period. So that was one of the things I always thought. So when COVID came along, I think it was in late 2019, and you could say, hang on a minute, this is looking pretty serious. I thought, well, I need to know if this is going to be the biggest thing in my political career I'm going to have to make calls on. I need to know, I need to learn everything I possibly can. I need to speak to as many people and experts as I can to get, as you said earlier, to get the varying opinions. You need to know both sides or all sides of the argument about what you can do.
Yep.
And that's what sort of started me down the track that I was on, and I could quickly see that it was like everything the government was doing and saying, and the censorship was just nuts. It was completely contrary to the evidence. It was contrary to what all these experts were telling me, and I was very privileged to. I got to have a good relationship with people like Dr. Zev Zelenko, the late great Dr. Zev, and many other. You got to know Peter McCullough very well. Brian Tyson out of California that was treating people. Dolores Cahill, Shankar Chetty over in South Africa. All these people I would have detailed conversations, and I had no medical background when I started this, and they'd explain stuff to me, like sort of learn a bit, and I wouldn't sort of catch all of it, and I understand. Then someone else would explain a bit to me. So, and what they were telling me privately was a greater concern. They were was slightly different. They were pulling their punches publicly because there were certain things that you simply couldn't say. And then that's one thing went to the next, and I was left with a decision: do I call it as I see it, or and basically go on a suicide mission, and knowing that that's eventually going to end my political career. It'll be some fun. We have some fun along the way fighting back, or do I shut up? Do I shut up on this? Hide under my desk, go quiet, buy into the narrative, and sort of try and resurface in a couple of years time when it's all over to fight on other issues. And that was the choice I was left with. And with what I'd been told. I had no alternative. So I had to, you know, it was you basically had to strap yourself in and fire away, and knowing that you're going to get slaughtered.
So before we dive into the consequences of that, I just had a few people just commenting that they're just having trouble hearing you. Do you have an external microphone or something that you can move a little bit closer?
I might come a bit closer. How's that?
Yeah,
I'll speak up. I'll try and speak up a bit. Hopefully that'll be a bit better.
Yep, hopefully. So Lisa has also reported that she's put headphones on, and that's helping. Gavin, absolutely, that's what we're here for, but also we need context for why we're talking about it. So that's what we're doing now. It's just you know, not everyone's necessarily followed Craig closely. Not everyone knows his story. Not everyone knows mine. So we're gonna kind of ease our way in to this a little bit. So from your perspective, you'd been elected 4 times. You'd been a politician by then for somewhat 12 odd years, as much as you might have been an outsider when you came into the Liberal Party and got pre-selected the first time. You were no longer an outsider. You were very much an insider. In reality, your life was kind of set if you just chose to shut up and go along with it.
That's right. Look, I had a safe seat. Okay. And even if they wanted, you know, if you towed the factional line, did what you were told, didn't rock the boat, upsetting any of the factional bosses, you were basically guaranteed your safe seat for a long time. And if they wanted you to leave your safe seat, there was always plenty of other things on the table. Government can appoint, has hundreds of positions of people that they can appoint, and you'll always be looked after or found a job somewhere, or there's so many positions that they can give you. Just that. There's governor of Norfolk Island, there's governor of Christmas Island. You've got all the embassies around the world, sort of thing. Take from some of the embassies. There's board positions on all these government corporations. There's plenty of places where ex-politicians can go, where they're looked after if they toe the line and sort of do the right thing by the party machines.
Yeah. So, what was going on behind closed doors inside Parliament House when you were making this decision? Were people saying something different behind closed doors to what we were seeing publicly, or was that pretty much the same?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I was the way it works. We have a party room meeting. So when Parliament sits, there's what they call the party room meetings, which are once a week, every Tuesday morning. So basically, from 9 o'clock until 12 noon is set aside for both those party room meetings on a Tuesday. So Parliament doesn't start to 12 o'clock, and that's where you have your party room discussions. A bit of sometimes debate can be a bit contentious. Well, that's where you're meant to thrash out all the ideas amongst the party room. Right? And what got me sort of first involved in it, I could see. I saw someone sent me a video, and it was of Dr. Zelenko, and I didn't know who it was at the time. And this doctor speaking, and it was a direct message to President Trump. And he was saying, President Trump, I think I found a solution to the COVID problem, right? And he was talking from his first-hand experience as a doctor on the ground, treating patients, reporting on his actual results. And that was a combination of hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and an antibiotic, azithromycin. And he called it the bullet and the gun. And he talked about the importance of combining the three together. The bullet, the gun, and the shield, he called it. So the gun was the hydroxychloroquine, the bullet was the zinc, and the shield was the antibiotic. And he did the video, President Trump, I think of that. And I thought, that's fantastic, great news. But before I was going to post it, I'll check. Is there a guy called Dr. Zelenko in New York? Does this look like him? Because he had the long Hasidic Jewish beard, which some people have accused me of being racist for saying, but Dr. Zelenko said no, he agreed with me that I was allowed to say that. And then I checked, this to me seemed legitimate. So I press basically post. Anyhow, about a week later, I get a call from someone at the ABC, a journalist. And the journalist goes, are you going to apologise for posting this information? What are you talking about? And she says, that video of that Zelenko guy, Facebook taken it down because it's misinformation. I said, hang on a minute. I said, I know you're keen to try and get something, a hit job on me, but can't you see you're missing the story? The story here is that we have a doctor reporting his actual results, right? And he is being censored by someone from a large social media company that isn't treating patients. Can't you see how big a story that is? And just straight over the top of the journalist head, all they were interested in was doing a hit job on me. Facebook said it was misinformation, therefore it was information. Facebook were the new gods of the world. And if they said it was misinformation, that was it. You couldn't argue about it. And I'd posted something that they deleted, and therefore I must apologise to everyone. Yeah. So so when that came across, I got on to the telephone and I searched one night and found the Zelenko's number and actually phoned him and spoke with the guy. And we went through it. And we became. He tragically passed away. He was very, very ill at the time, and we became good mates on the phone. He explained all these things to me, and he said, "Read this, read that, read that." So I became like every night I'd sit up for a couple of hours and devour. There was a
lot to read through that period of time.
Everything I possibly can, and it seemed like at this time we had countless doctors around the world, and we also had I'll name him. He's happy for that. Emeritus Professor Robert Clancy here in Australia. Right now, he's I think unarguably our top immunologist. He's someone that has developed a vaccine himself. He's someone that's basically. He said to me once. He said, he says all these chief medical officers. He says I've taught them all. He said they're all my students. He said, I'll tell you what. He said all the ones in the government sector, he says they were my worst students. Right? He said they struggled to get through, and he said the best students went off into private practice. And he says now all these dubbos, he says my worst ranked students are actually now running the show. He said,
well, there's that old saying. I'm sure you'd be familiar with the first half of it. Those that can't do teach, but there's a second half. It's those that can't even teach regulate.
Yeah,
and that's what.
Yeah, so he rang me and he said, Craig, mate, you're right on this hydroxychloroquine stuff. He explained it to me and how he done it. And he said, I've given that. He said, I've given about probably 8,000 scripts of this over my life, my career. He said, I never had one adverse event. And now they're saying this is dangerous. He says, it's completely nuts. He said, I've spoken to all these other doctors overseas and the stuff works. He says, you're right. And to me, it was the, issue you mentioned earlier, there's always two sides to something. There's always but on this, when it came, remember we had the potential of thousands of people dying. We had a low cost, inexpensive treatment that was being used by medical doctors overseas that were reporting great success with it. We had peer-reviewed publications showing its success. It was low cost. It was off patent, and yet we had bureaucrats in Australia who had never treated a COVID patient, deciding that all these doctors overseas were wrong, and not only were they wrong, but this had to be banned in Australia. To me, it was one of the most distinctive cases in my political career of basically good versus evil. Right? Remember, if someone has died, if there's a thought that someone is going to die, right, you would throw the kitchen sink at it to save their life. You would give them. If you were like involved, you'd try every possible thing that you could to keep that person alive. And here we had a treatment which had copious evidence showing it was effective, right? Low cost, right? Ample supplies. I remember Clive Palmer had bought 30 million doses for every Australia. So it's not to say there was any shortage of supply of it. And yet we had that chief medical officer in Queensland decide that any doctor that prescribed this would go to jail for 6 months. It was the purest case, I'd say, of basically good versus evil. To deny the sick people the opportunity of accessing a medical treatment when they're potentially going to die, to me was just so clearly wrong.
Right.
And the
So
evidence we had. Sorry, go. Yep.
I want to start to dive into this because this is really where I think, from a mental health perspective, this is where it really started to have an impact. I was like you early on. I just wanted to know. I wanted to know more evidence. I'm open to the possibility that in my lifetime we are going to see a genuinely really dangerous virus come through that might require a response that goes against my libertarian instincts, and I might just have to suck it up and hold my tongue under such circumstances. Maybe, hopefully, that doesn't happen. If it does, I'll make the decisions then. But I was open in the early stages to the possibility that this might be a really, really terrible disease. And then, of course, more information comes out, more evidence comes out. You realize the reaction isn't warranted based on the information the data out of Italy, out of Sweden, out of Israel, etc. And then you start to hear about treatments, and then you start to watch the treatments being sidelined, and you begin to understand that there is a level of malevolence here that I certainly hadn't seen previously in my lifetime. And so what it calls to mind for me is a chap that I did a video about many, many years ago. He's from, I think it was the late 1700s or early 1700s, somewhere there. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis, and he was a doctor. And he was in charge of a hospital. And in hospitals at that time, birthing mothers who came to a hospital were dying of post-birth infections at a rate of about 25 to 35%, thereabouts. So quite literally, in some hospitals, 1/3 of every mother giving birth then passed away from a postpartum infection. And that was considered normal. It was called puerperal fever, and it was just believed that there was nothing they could do about that. That's just how it is. And he noticed a couple of things. He noticed that poor women that gave birth in the gutter out the front of the hospital had a better chance of surviving than the women that came into the hospital did. And he noticed that a very dear colleague of his died after nicking himself with a scalpel. And the symptoms that he exhibited before he died were basically identical to the symptoms of puerperal fever, but that was impossible because puerperal fever was this thing that only happened to mothers postpartum. And what he realized was that his dear friend had just been doing an autopsy and cutting up cadavers. It was a teaching hospital, so they would cut up cadavers and teach upcoming surgeons and so forth. And he'd nicked himself with a dirty scalpel that he'd been using cutting up a cadaver. And he realized that what was happening was doctors were cutting up cadavers as part of the teaching hospital and then walking into a birthing suite and using highly invasive measures to assist in childbirth without any form of hand washing in between. They literally would just walk out of one and straight into the other. And so he developed this theory, which at the time was considered desperately unscientific, how incredibly naive. He developed this theory that there was some relationship between the cutting up of the cadavers and the birthing mothers. And so he introduced hand washing. It was a horrible concoction that he came up with of chlorinated lime. And it would cause the skin to peel and all sorts of things. But we know medically now, we know it most definitely kills germs. And he forced doctors to do that before they went and helped birthing mothers. And births in his hospital dropped to below 2%. Births. The deaths of mothers after childbirth dropped to below 2%, basically immediately. And so now he had this really compelling evidence that there was some substance to his theory, and he took it to the powers that be. He took it to all the top medical schools. And this is a man with highly credentialed, running a hospital in Europe. And they laughed at him, they mocked him, they called him names. And there's much more to the story. I won't go through the whole story. But ultimately, what happened was he borderline lost his mind because he was looking at a situation where women all over Europe were dying needlessly. And he knew that to be true. And he knew the mechanism by which it was happening, or at least he understood where it was coming from, and he knew how to fix it. And he had the proof. But all he would get was mockery and derision and demotion. He got fired from that hospital, had to go back to his home country and try and get another job there, etc. Eventually, he began writing really, really strident letters, and he was basically calling them murderers, calling them killers. They said he'd lost his mind, and they tricked him into going to see a patient in an insane asylum, locked him in, and 2 weeks later, he was dead. He died, ironically, of an infection. It's believed that he got beaten up by the guards and that one of those wounds got infected, and that's ultimately what killed him. But the experience for him of sitting there, understanding the truth about that situation and of what was really going on, and being stonewalled and blocked by the people who were supposed to care, drove him either to madness or to near madness. And I can only imagine that your situation you may not have known about Ignaz until now, but your situation must have felt quite similar.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that story before, but there was a time when I thought to myself, am I going mad? Like I didn't understand at the time that the reason for this was because if it was admitted that hydroxychloroquine was an effective treatment, that the vaccines wouldn't have been able to get their emergency use authorization or their provisional approval in Australia.
Yes.
I didn't understand that, but to me the evidence was absolutely. It was like it was just so black and white, and I didn't understand the reason for this subterfuge and pushback and why.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm thinking to myself, am I going mad? I must have missed something. What have I missed? And I'm reading stuff over and over and thinking, you know, how can I see white and I've got all these supposed experts, government experts, seeing black and coming across and how come no one in the media? Like, we're meant to have, now one of the great things that's meant to protect our democracy is a free media, that the media is there, you know, to so if, you know, politicians or political mobs go off the rail with bad decisions, you've got investigative journalism to go there and to hammer them. That's an important you know, balance. And none of the media are out attacking me, and you know, the cartoonists having a field day, you know, drawing me as, you know, one of the cartoons kept on drawing me as a dog that was doing turds everywhere. You know, that was sort of like something I thought it was funny, sort of thing. You know, and I'm thinking, you know, is there something? There must be something wrong. There must be something wrong with me. How can I see this? And then, of course, you got the isolation in your you know, in the party room. Like I'd speak up. We talked about those party room meetings. I'd speak up and I'd say, like, you know, there's this peer-reviewed study, and there's that peer-reviewed study, and there's this and there's that, and this doctor says this and this doctor says that, and, you know, these people are actually treating COVID, you know. And then so we've got to stand up. Our liberal principles are we must stand up for the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship, right? It's not up to. That's one of the fundamental principles of, again, a free democratic society and those that believe in freedom. That for your medical treatment, that you go into that doctor's surgery, the door closes, and you have a frank discussion with your doctor. You trust him, you rely on your medical expertise. He discusses with you what treatments are best. And if you don't like it, or even if you do like it, you then go and get a second or a third opinion. Now, that, what I call sanctity, the doctor-patient relationship, was thrown out the window. And Australian doctors weren't allowed to tell us what they thought. They were given a script handed down from the government and said, if you vary from this script, you will be sacked. You will lose your position. You will lose your license. And for a doctor that may have spent, you know, sort of 12 years studying before they start to earn an income, and all of a sudden has got you know, rent on a surgery or something. Has got everything tied up, and kids at school. They've got overdrafts and things, and they've got a small window to try and earn, to recoup the study costs and the years they had, you know, just studying and not earning an income. That is devastating to them. And many doctors just said, look, you know, some brave doctors pushed against it and are still lost everything, have lost their positions and lost their jobs. They're still fighting to get them back. Yeah, most doctors and the Liberal Party, the party that's meant to believe in freedom and individual, you know, freedoms and rights, just closed their eyes. And I became basically virtually like, you know, a person on grata around the halls of Parliament, sort of thing, you know. The only time people would speak to me is when there was no one else in sight. They'd sort of come up to me and they'd look around, and if there's someone else in the corridor, they'd walk past you. It was only when there was, you know, when there was no one around, they come up and they go, oh, good on you, Craig. Good on you, Craig. I agree with what you say. I say, for God's sake, man, speak up, say something. Oh no, I can't. I can't. You know.
See, in many ways, that's worse. That's worse. It's the people that would admit in private that either that you were right or that they saw value in what you were doing, at the very least, holding the other side to account, but they lacked the courage to speak up. So you were essentially, you were sabotaging your career. You were watching people literally dying unnecessarily, and you knew that didn't have to be happening. But also, and I don't know this for a fact because you've never mentioned this to me, but I would expect, given my own experience and what happened as soon as I began speaking out at anti-lockdown protests, I would imagine that your office and your inbox would have been absolutely chock-a-block full of messages from people who were also losing their minds.
Yeah, look, people were. It's funny. I got people were calling me and telling me their story after being vaccinated, telling me terrible stories about how they had loved ones that were umming and ahhing about whether they should go to hospital or not, and then decided to go to hospital, and then were in hospital a few hours and rang up, so they're just about to put me on a ventilator, and give me remdesivir, and then within 48 hours they were dead.
Yeah, REM death sentence, I call it.
Run death is near. And then all the evidence was showing this wasn't like this, and I had doctors coming to me and said, what do I do? What do I do? And and then in Parliament, I was continually, Bowen and Albanese used to make a game of it to put motions against me that I should be condemned, condemned in Parliament. I remember there's one day Albanese came up and I gave him a bell. I said, I wanted to table. There were three or four peer-reviewed studies I had. I think one was from Italy, a couple from France, a couple from Holland, one from America, showing, experienced medical researchers showing that they were having success in saving life with hydroxychloroquine. I said, I want to table these. I'd like to table these, table these documents as Parliament. Albanese goes, no, I don't want to hear that rubbish. So I was so frustrated. I went round to his office, and I said to his secretary, here, please give these as a matter of urgency to Mr. Albanese to please read. I went round into his office and he never read them. He never read anything. It was all just they were just playing. It was just all just political games. They didn't care what harm they did. If they thought they could, get some harm against the government, and a lot of the media organisations like that, because I was a member of the government, so they could bash me, they could harm the government, and they didn't care what the facts were, what the data was, what the science said. It was just a matter of trying to get some type of political leg up.
So you must have understood that there was little to no chance of that changing. It wouldn't have taken very long before you realised the game was rigged. What goes through your head at that point? How do you start to? What do you do in that situation?
Well, certainly wasn't an easy period. So you had to sort of sit down and think, okay, what do I do? If I can shut up, and I was told if you shut up, you'll be looked after. Right?
Yeah.
That was the message from Morrison's office. We want you to shut up. We don't want you to say anything. You will take the vaccine, and you will tell everyone in your electorate to take the vaccine. I was told by the Prime Minister. That was instructions that I got. And you will not do any more interviews on television, and if you do that, we'll look after you, sort of thing. Right? That was So I went back and I sort of sat down and I sort of thought, okay, the first thing is, okay, if I'm, this may require going and living in the jungle, effectively, going to live in the jungle and fight in the jungle as a jungle warfare sort of thing, right? Is your family okay? Are they going to be okay if you can do that? And fortunately, that was in a situation that was the first thing I thought of, and I was in a lucky situation where I thought they'd be okay if I had to go and fight and live in the jungle. But there were many people that didn't. There were many people that were in a situation that had kids in school and the family home, and if they didn't keep up with what they were doing, they would have lost all those things. So they had no alternative. They had to give in to the system. So I was in a fortunate position. I said, okay, well let's strap the gloves on here and let's fight. I sort of like I know it's going to be probably a hopeless cause because of the weight of the weight of what we had weighing against us, and and at times it seemed there's a time that I thought there's two people in the world, there's Dr. Zelenko and myself, we're the only people pushing back against them. That's what I thought. I thought that was it. There was two of us, right? I thought, I'm sure, but I didn't realise there were tens of thousands of other Australians that felt exactly the same way. And I think that's why some of those rallies were so successful, because I remember you'd go to the first one and you'd walk up there and you think, is anyone, in the first rallies, I remember we had in Sydney there in Hyde Park, there was only some small crowds, and you'd turn up and you'd think, is anyone going to be there? Would there be 100 people? Would there be 50 people? Would you be 100 people? Yeah. And you go to these rallies and you'd park somewhere, you'd walk in, and then you'd see thousands and thousands of people with their protest signs. And you realise, hey, they think exactly like I do. I'm not crazy. And I'm sure everyone that went and saw all those other people there thought exactly the same thing. Hey, you know what? I'm not crazy. All these other people are thinking exactly the same.
This is something that I saw very clearly because, of course, what happened in Victoria happened sort of earlier. The vaccines weren't so much of an issue. We had the lockdowns to deal with first, and we were, I don't know, 12 months into lockdowns before the vaccines were even available, much less mandated. And, you know, the situation with Victoria Police meant that our numbers were very few. And so people like myself were going in there every week or every couple of weeks, depending on which particular moment we're talking about. And literally, I've tried to process this a lot, actually. And the best thing I can liken it to is imagine you're in a gang war, you're in a turf war, but one gang has body armor and shields and knives and guns and pepper spray and rubber bullets, and the courts will instinctively side with them, and you have signs and songs and chants, and the courts will instinctively side against you. And that's essentially, we were in a state of low-grade gang warfare for 18 months on the streets of Melbourne. And the reason I asked you about the messages from constituents is because that's actually the thing that I think I found the most difficult to process, because I spoke at the very first anti-lockdown protest. It was on April 25th, 2020. I didn't pick the date or the location. I was just invited to speak, and I said yes. And I went and I spoke, and I live streamed it, and that went viral. And 100,000 views or so by the time I got home. People were just desperate for anything. And we had this massive wave of hate come in. My inbox was just full of people, spewing hate. That's to be expected. You don't become a politician or a political commentator without accepting in advance that that's going to happen. Then a massive wave of support, which was wonderful. And a lot of people saying what you said, just so relieved to discover that they're not alone. They're not crazy. They're not the only ones thinking these things. But then came the third wave of people reaching out, and that was the people wanting to tell their stories. And that was difficult. And that I've been seeing a counselor in the last couple of months, just because I'm still trying to get back on top of this. And that was what really hurt. And at first I felt this obligation to try and help these people, and very quickly realized how completely powerless I was. I had no money. I had no power, no influence. I had no ability to change anyone's circumstances. But I quickly realized these people weren't talking to me because they thought I could help. They were talking to me because they'd actually given up on finding any help. They knew that no one could help, and they didn't expect me to be able to either. They were literally talking to me because they believed that I would listen. And that was it. That was the long and short of it.
Yeah, I think, people, in the very early stage, I would say people, you've got a clear case when you're talking about, I'm talking about here the mandates in particular. So you've got a clear case here to fight against this, because it's not in your contract. It's not, you're in a workplace situation. Your workplace is covered by a workplace contract, and it's not in your contract that your employer can force you to undergo an experimental medical intervention. Right? That is absolutely crystal clear.
Yeah.
And we had the Fair Work Commissions in this country that are meant to look after the workers, siding against the workers.
Yeah.
Right. Absolute corrupt conduct by the Fair Work Commission of this country. There was one decision, I think, early here in New South Wales, and one of the Fair Work Commission, what they call them, members or deputy presidents, wrote a dissenting opinion, right? And she was basically sent off to a re-education camp and not allowed to handle any of these cases. So, if you're an employee and your employer can force you to inject a experimental substance into your body to keep your job, what is the point of workers' rights?
Yeah,
and we have the party, the Fair Work Commission, and the party that's meant to stand up for workers, the Labor Party, going, oh, that's okay. It's okay. Yeah, bosses.
Yeah, rubber stamping it.
So you couldn't get, the case was you knew that you could not get a fair trial for things.
Yeah, no chance.
No chance. We saw that. I remember the case what was the young girl? Zoe Buller, her name was.
Zoe Buller, yeah.
Yeah. That was arrested in her own home, arrested and handcuffed in her own home in front of her children. And I remember I was in Parliament the day, and someone sent that through to me. It was about, I think, about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I watched it, and I said, I remember watching. I thought, this must be like a candid camera sort of thing, you know. Right? And then she said, I think her husband said, what's she being arrested for? And the police officer said, for posting something on Facebook, right?
Yeah, for incitement.
And I thought that was the joke, right? I thought, right, yeah, that's the comedy. That's the comedy part. Yeah, you get arrested for posting something on Facebook. You know, the police come and knock on your door and handcuff you for posting stuff on Facebook. How funny.
Yeah.
And then this like horror came across me when I realized this ain't a joke. This is actually happening here in my country.
Yeah.
So I remember I rang all the presenters on Sky News that were coming up later on and said, you've got to play this. You've got to put this on. You know, this is just outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went down to the chamber to try and just see who was around it. And I found some of the Victorian Liberal MPs. And I said, guys, have you seen this? We've got to raise hell about this in the Parliament. This is outrageous. This is such an abuse of human rights. This is Dan, you know, we've got to. Oh no, we shouldn't do that. You know. Yeah. And the cowardly gutlessness. Right. Yeah. I know it maybe she was a troublemaker, and that's why they put the handcuffs on her, and you know, so maybe it's probably fake. You know, probably really didn't happen. We've got to check it out and make sure it's 100% right. We shouldn't say anything until that. So guys, look at it. It's not a fake. And you remember there was when that happened, when it came out, there were people saying this can't be true. It's a fake, and they were saying, well, the badges were wrong and things like that. That was one of the thoughts, and it wasn't you. That was a natural thought that a lot of people would have. And yet we couldn't. I couldn't get no one into the federal parliament, especially the Victorian Liberals, to raise a criticism of Dan Andrews.
Yeah, so I sent it straight to Andrew Bolt as well, and he knows who I am. It wasn't just a random email to him, and he responded and said, "Are you sure this is real?"
That's right. Yeah.
And I went back and I watched it again. And I analyzed everything, and by this point in time, I've been in the political commentary game for 11 years. I've seen some hoaxes, I've seen some shit.
Yes, yep. And you're on guard, because if you put something up that's a hoax, you know they're going to smash you in the media. So
I replied and I said, I will stake my reputation and whatever goodwill I've earned with you over the years, I will stake it all on this being absolutely real. And sure enough, it was absolutely real, as I think it was evident that it was. But it's interesting is to me, Craig, that people would say this has to be a hoax, right? This is obviously a hoax. And then when they find out that it's irrefutably real, they still somehow find a way to rationalize it, and suddenly it's okay. It's right. The mental gymnastics are extraordinary.
That is happening. It's continuing to happen. You see, people lining up for their 9th shot of this COVID vaccine. Now, you've still got people saying, "Oh, you know, ivermectin, it's horse dewormer and hydroxychloroquine. You know, it's like injecting bleach. You know, and yet you've got like hundreds of studies from thousands of medical researchers around the world showing it's effective, and they still are incomplete. What's the saying from 1984? The party told you to deny the evidence before your eyes and your ears. Yeah. That was their that was their ultimate instruction, or their final.
That's right. That's right.
Something like that. Yeah. And there's so many people that have been like that. I know there's the human nature that you don't want to admit that you got things wrong. That's a part of human nature. But on the scale that it was, when the evidence was so clear in black and white, and these people are carrying on as though they're the ones following the science, and everyone else is a cooker, you know.
That's right. Oh, I've been called a cooker so many times. I've decided my next book's going to be a cookbook.
Yes.
It'll be called Recipes for Revolution.
Yeah. The other thing was to talk about the abuse that we had to put up with. Now, one of the things that happened to me was the media outlet called Crikey published my private parliamentary telephone, my mobile number, right, with a message: give him back what he deserves, or some words. Right? I was getting harassment, threats, death threats. We're going to get you, all this sort of stuff, right? They were coming in faster than I could delete them. Right?
Yeah.
By the time I gave up, I had 60,000 harassment, abusive, and threatening messages on my telephone as text messages.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the phone that overloaded the memory, so I couldn't use the phone. Right.
Yeah.
I went to the AFP and I said, "Look, guys," I says, "look, this is a case of doxing. Right? This is what this mob have done. They have incited people to use a telecommunication device to menace and harass. Right?
Yep.
To use a communication device to menace and harass is an offence, and encouraging people to do it is insane. A clear black and white case about, right? And it should have set a good example that the media can't give members of Parliament's telephone number out to the public and say, give him what you think he deserves. And that would have been the precedent that should have been set, right? AFP looked at it, came back, no, mate, sorry.
Nothing. I remember that because I tried to reach out to you during that time after I saw the doxing, just to see if you're okay, because I've had, they've never succeeded, but I've had on multiple occasions, there's a certain mob in Melbourne that absolutely despise me, and they've tried to publish my phone number and my home address on a few occasions. And I tend to find out about it because supporters will then send me some of the posts. It'll be on 4chan or 8chan sometimes. They'll try and do this in some of the chat rooms, and they've been wrong every single time. But there's always that thought in the back of your mind. I mean, how long before they're right? You know, I'm very protective of my phone number. However, it has been, you know, around. It's been my phone number now for the better part of 10 years, and it's been around. So who knows? And so I tried to reach out to you because I guessed you'd be under an avalanche, and I never got a reply on that phone number, and then found out sometime later your new phone number, and I thought in hindsight, that's obvious.
A parliamentary phone with a parliamentary authorised phone number had been disabled by a campaign of harassment and intimidation, right? Incited by a media outlet, and a complete breach of Australian law, and the AFP did absolutely nothing about it. The other case of doxing was the good old Sydney Morning Herald decided to publish my home address, not in the real estate section, but in the in the media section, in the news section sort of thing. Because I was, my wife wanted to get out of the place. She wanted to sell the place, and the harassment was too much, and the threats of people coming and protesting. So this good old Sydney Morning Herald published my home address, and some crazy person went to the effort, and they made up. It was hundreds of these little packets, and they put a I don't know, it was an Aspro or something, or a pill or something inside of each of these little packets, right? And they typed out like a prescription, Craig Kelly, hydroxychloroquine, take one sort of thing. So look at a prescription, right? And they come to my house, and they'd thrown hundreds across the front garden and the front driveway, right? It would have taken them to prepare. It would have taken them hours and hours and hours to do. And then when we had an open house, some guys turned up, right? Entered the place on false pretenses. Gone up to my bedroom, put an Islamic flag in the window of my bedroom, went out to the backyard, then photographed the flag and said, "Look here, Kelly's an Islamic lover." Again, that is like on so many levels. That was like, it was trespass, right? It was inciting racial and religious hatred, right? They should have thrown the book at this bloke, right? Made the complaint to the AFP. They said, "Oh yes, thank you, Mr. Kelly, thank you. We'll look at it." Came back, "Oh no, we're not going to do anything." Said, "How can you not?" So the guy trespassed on my home. He entered my home under false pretenses. He claimed that he was there. He claimed he entered my home claiming he was a potential buyer for the house. He had no intention of buying the house. He had it pre-planned that he was going to do a political stunt, right? And gain, right? And that was, no, we're not going to do anything about it. Right?
So the thing that sparked my invitation to you to come on to have a chat tonight, I want to turn more directly onto the mental health stuff and men's mental health and more generally, not just your story and my story, but also men's mental health more generally, but all three of those. But the thing that triggered that was something that I said when you and I were both on Joel Jamal's excellent new production, The Arc, which unfortunately comes out on Thursday night. So I've got competition on Thursday nights now. But 6:30 Thursday nights, look up Joel Jamal's Arc. It's a very, very good show. He's had some budget to put into his studio, and he's doing a really lovely job. And you and I were both on the very first episode, Craig. And Joel was expressing a sentiment that concerned me significantly because I know where he's at with this. And he was saying, essentially, I'm paraphrasing off from memory, but essentially saying, I'm responsible because I didn't do more. I'm responsible for the harm that other people have suffered. I should have done more. I could have done more. If only I'd been able to do a better job, then some of these people wouldn't have ended up suffering. And I understand exactly where he's coming from, and I know you do. But the fact is that you, me, Joel, so many other good people, many people watching this right now, we did not just enough from a moral perspective to have a clear conscience, but we ended up in a position where we were harming ourselves. You harmed your future prospects. You made your life a lot more difficult than it could have been. I was at risk of physical injury and arrest. The financial consequences have been terrible. Mental health consequences have been terrible. For Joel, I know it was a terrible, terrible time. And taking on this kind of misguided responsibility, I understand the instinct to do that, and I've had to specifically address that myself. But I think with men, we have this protection instinct. We have this desire to protect. And it can be tempting sometimes to think that if we do everything right, then everything will work out all right. And therefore, if everything hasn't worked out all right, it must be on us. We must have failed somehow.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Joel in that interview, and I said, Joel, you actually did so much, and you're actually carrying scars now. And I still don't think Joel can see his. It took me a while to see mine, and I'm still, some of them are healing and some of them are still very much open wounds. But I said, you've got to get to the point where you can see your scars and you can heal, and you can get to the point where you wear those scars with pride. Where you can actually and it satisfies that manly instinct, that masculine need to know that you were a protector and to know that you did what you could. The carrying of battle scars is about proof that you were in the fight. You weren't a coward. You didn't run away. Maybe you didn't win the fight. Having a scar proves that you lived, you survived the fight. It proves that you were in the fight. It doesn't prove that you won the fight. And I think that's the key that I'm trying to work through, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, on that, you mentioned that you said, "Well, I feel damaged."
Yeah,
that used. I think it's. I don't mean to. And I thought to myself, "Wow, that's exactly how I feel." At time. I feel a bit damaged about what is happening, and I'm trying to reconcile that and. I think how I've gone through and reconciling, and you're right. I think back and I had countless people telling me how they had loved ones that died and people that have lost their jobs, and I think back, wow, if I could have been more effective in the arguments that I used, I was in there. I had the floor on Parliament. If I could have been more persuasive in some way in the media, then maybe I could have. Maybe it's if I had done a better job, this wouldn't happen. These people would still be alive. That hurts. I think you're also you're grieving also. I think for the things that you lost. I think if you look at the things that we lost, I think one of the big things that we lost is our perception of Australia. Sort of you grew up in that. There's a perception of Australia. We were we were this sort of like rugged individualistic country. With this disdain, this healthy disdain for authority. And that's what made, Australian servicemen during the wars such the most respected and of soldiers, because they had a disdain for authority and they were independent thinkers and they could quickly change battle plans on the spot if it needed be. They weren't this robotic thing that, the general told you to go and do this. And you just go and do it mindlessly. You can think for yourself. And that to me was part of our Australian character. And our Australian nature that enabled us, through the decades when I was growing up, as a nation to punch above our weight.
Yeah.
And we looked at things like, what happened in Europe and Germany in the You don't like to make these comparisons, but they are relevant.
Sure.
How did they let this happen? How did people, the idea that I remember at school to be a snitch was the worst possible. If you're a snitch, that was the worst possible thing you could possibly be. And yet we had a thing in society where it was like we had a premier here in New South Wales, Barry Jacklin, and encouraging people to snitch on their neighbours. And I remember listening to the radio one day, a woman had rang up and she said she'd reported the 2 children in the house next door because they were playing in their backyard and they should have been locked inside because the lockdowns were on. And this was the sort of snitching that was going on. So the Australia that we thought that we grew up in and we see that is lost. It's not the country. We see that when push came to shove, and we were just a weak society of lemmings that would do what big government told us to do, would snitch on our neighbours. And I think that's been very hard for many of us to live with. I think it's also the my media consumption was I'd listen to Alan Jones, 2GB on the radio here. 2GB was the station I'd formerly 2GB was what I'd listen to, right? I'd read the Australian newspaper. I'd watch Sky News, right? And that was, you'd also watch, of course, other, that was not exclusive, but they were the 3 media outlets that you relied upon and you trusted.
Yeah.
And and I had involvement with them. Like I was regularly on Sky News and regularly on 2GB, and had a good relationship with the economic journalists at the Australian, the political journalists in the Australian, and all of a sudden I find myself, well, Alan Jones has taken off 2GB.
Yeah.
I'm no longer welcome on 2GB, and they're making sort of cracking jokes about me on 2GB that I'm some crazed anti-vaxxer. And I think one day 2GB deliberately mixed me up with Craig Thompson and said, "Oh yeah, Craig Kelly's been charged with sexual offences or something like that." Look at all these people ringing me saying 2GB's just said on the radio you were charged with sexual offences and been arrested. So hang on. So then they gave an apology. I found later they gave an apology. No, it wasn't Craig Kelly referring to, it was Craig Thompson that put that to it. Right? So, and then on Sky News, I was regularly on Sky News. I was on a couple of times a week on the different programs.
Yep.
In fact, they used to, the colleagues in Canberra used to make jokes about it. I had my own office and desk up there. and when Sky News set up a big new studio up in Canberra. And even at what they call the Midwinter's Ball, Morrison made a joke, you guys are all here. Kelly's up there running the Sky News programs for you. Yes, and that was a funny joke. So, and all of a sudden, Facebook and YouTube had gone back and through several of the segments that I'd been on Sky News. They decided they didn't like what I said. They deleted those videos and they gave Sky News a 7-day suspension. And Sky News business model is that they rely so much on the advertising from Facebook. That's more financially viable to them than the subscriptions. So they have a 7-day ban with a threat. If you do it again, put one more of these videos up again, you get a 30-day ban. So Sky News had done, well, I'm sorry, 6 out of the 7 videos that got banned, you were on, so we can't have you on anymore.
Yeah.
So 2GB's attacking me. Jones is off the radio. They've taken Jones off Sky News. I'm banned from Sky News. And the Australian newspaper that I trusted and followed and read would continually run all these hit attack pieces on me.
Yeah.
Just telling blatant lies. And once they put this big picture up of me sort of saying, only parasites use ivermectin, right? As though I'm sort of this
as though you're the parasite. Yeah.
And they pick the worst possible photo that they can find of you and put those up, and then they do these stories without even calling you or contacting you, or completely unbalanced sort of thing. Yeah. So the 3 main stability things of where you're consuming your media from are all of a sudden all wiped out and gone.
Yeah.
And then I had my Facebook page. Now my Facebook page at the time, I was getting more views and more traffic on it than Albanese and Morrison combined.
Yeah.
The ABC did a whole segment on it. They were trying to work out why Craig Kelly's Facebook page was so effective, why he was getting all these views. And the ABC did an analysis of the times that I was posting, right, and compared it to everyone. It would have taken him a week to do this, right, to try and work out, right? And I posted late night because that's when I did it. And everyone else was asleep, and I was still up working. Every other MP had gone to bed and and pulled the shutters down for the night. And I was still up working, reading and posting stuff. And then they blackbanned me. They blackbanned me. Just told me sorry. You're cancelled. We're cancelled. And all personal photos, private stuff I had,
all gone.
All obliterated.
It actually reminds me of Rukshan, and I think his peak was during the couple of days of the when the CFMEU guys finally joined the party a year and a half in. They tried to take over the movement and claim credit for it, but anyway, that's another little sore point for mine that I'm going to have to let go. But Rukshan was out there filming and live streaming all of that, and he at one point, and I remember I was watching at the time, he had over 100,000 people watching his live stream.
Yeah.
And someone grabbed a screenshot of that, and then a screenshot of, I think it was the Channel 7 chopper that was up in the air at the time, had like 4,000 people watching that live stream. There's Rukshan is an order of magnitude plus beyond. Now, there was a comment here that I want to bring up because I think this is really worth talking about as well, because you and I talk about the impact of that sense of having failed because despite our best efforts, we didn't accomplish what we really set out to accomplish. There's an awful lot of men out there, and women as well, but there's an awful lot of men out there who are now having to process a very different kind of sense of failure. And Theo, I want to just acknowledge and thank you for your candidness and your just honesty here. So for those that aren't able to read, or for those that are watching aren't able to read this font or are listening to the podcast, Theo says, "Listening to you boys makes me sad that I failed to step up. You were heroes to me. Just like you, my family made me feel I was crazy for criticizing government. Stay strong. You've proven the facts. Thank you." So thank you, Theo. I appreciate that. There's a lot of men who and women who took the jabs because they felt they had no choice. And they did the calculation of, well, what does my family need me to do? And it was actually their obligation to their family. It was actually their very real and very genuine need to provide for their family that then caused them to take the jab that they didn't want to take. And then some of those people have gone on to have adverse reactions. There's other people. There's one bloke that I think about quite a lot, actually, and I'd love to meet him someday. He was caught on camera by a very, very brave protester, and I included some of this footage in Battleground Melbourne. It's the police officer who talks with the protester about how, go home, we don't want to arrest people, but we will. And the protester says, well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And the police officer basically says, oh, well, I can't do any other job at the moment. I'm not skilled to do anything else. My wife's lost her job. I've got to do this to put food on the table. Each and every one of these different scenarios has a very different impact on the mental health and on the psyche of the person that makes these choices. One of the things that I realized, Craig, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, is I realized that when a test of your conscience comes along, the doing the wrong thing rewards you immediately. But you then have to live with yourself for the rest of your life. So it rewards you in the short term and it punishes you for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah.
Doing the right thing punishes you immediately. That's why it's a test. If there was no punishment, if there was nothing on the line, right, it wouldn't be a test. It punishes you immediately. And what I think is needed for me, and I'm sure for many others, is to be able to move past focusing on what has been lost and to actually focus on the pride of those scars that we carry. And those losses are the scars in many ways. But to be able to say, I was there and I made that choice and I made the courageous decision to do the right thing under those circumstances.
Look, a few things I comment on that. Firstly, remember there's a guy called, I think a European psychologist, I don't know, he's Belgium or Dutch, or Matthias Desmet. I found his words very comforting. He talked about, what do you call it, a mass psychosis or something of society, or something. He called it a mass formation of society, when basically everyone...
Mass formation psychosis, yeah.
And what he said, what prevents the true horrors of that taking over society is that there is a small number of people that are prepared to stand up and push back and say no. And if you look at it, if you think about what happened, there was enough of us, there was just enough of us, right? And everyone that went to a rally or, said no in some way or supported a freedom candidate or did anything to help at all helped to do it, right? We're all pushing back in the same direction. And there was just enough of us that the real extremes of what could have happened to our society didn't happen. Yeah, a lot of bad things happened along the way. But remember, the government had bought 10 shots for every man, woman, and child in this country.
Yeah.
So the plan was to have vaccine passports in place and make sure every person had 10 injections of this stuff.
And by the way, people don't join the dots here. We're talking about a product that has an expiry date.
That's right.
So they weren't buying 10 just in case you needed an annual shot for the next 10 years. They were buying 10 in the expectation that the average Australian would have had 10 within, I believe it was 2 years. That's what they expected when they put in the order.
Yep. And they had the vaccine passports in place. Right? So unless there was some of us, a group, just enough of us pushing back, that would have been in place. You would have had to have been forced to have 10 shots of this stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to go to a coffee shop. You wouldn't have been able to go to the pub, right? You wouldn't have been able to travel anywhere. Right? But there was enough of us that pushed back that stopped that insanity from happening.
Yeah.
Right. Eventually, remember there was a time there that you couldn't go to the shops. Unless you were vaccinated, you couldn't. There's a time you couldn't get a haircut.
I remember it well.
I can remember the madness of it. I says, in New South Wales, I couldn't get a haircut, but in Canberra I could. Right. So I could. You imagine like you've got Queanbeyan and Fish Week next to each other, like a stone's throw. Basically, you go from one suburb across the next suburb. So you couldn't get a haircut in this suburb, but you could in the other suburb. This was the madness that was going on. I remember going to get a haircut after I'd been locked up in Canberra for the second lot of 15 nights so I could get into Parliament, right? And going to get a haircut and thinking like, in Canberra, where isn't this fantastic? I can actually get a haircut down here, in a real barber's salon, and I'd been banned. But in New South Wales, the poor barber I had, he said, no, mate, he said, I can't. He said to me, he said, come in and I'll do a haircut for you with the back room. And he had all black, had the front door locked and had all black curtains over the window so no one could see it. That was how we would be today. Yeah. Unless people
black market haircuts. Can we just stop for a second and just dwell on this phrase for a moment? Black market haircuts. Yeah. I had two of them myself, 2 black market haircuts over the journey. And I looked pretty scruffy most of the time. And I actually ended up having a haircut in Albury, which is just over the border from Victoria. Yes. I went to get a haircut in Albury and I couldn't get in because all the salons were booked solid for weeks because of all the Victorians coming over the border, which is one of the many metrics that I use that I can demonstrate that there were a lot more unvaccinated people than the official figures would suggest.
Even something like hiring a car. Now, I went down to Melbourne for one of the rallies, and you're still able to luckily fly between Sydney and Victoria. They didn't close the border like they did to Brisbane. So I flew down. I had a whole lot of United Australia for freedom, core flips printed up, and I'd sort of transported them down.
I remember them. Yeah,
I had them on a big one of those sort of airport trolleys sort of thing. I've gone over to the Avis counter. I booked this through like the parliamentary booking sort of thing office, and gone there at the counter. He said, "Oh yeah, good day, Craig. Yeah, going good, mate. Yeah, we know. Yeah." He says, "Can I see your vaccine certificate?" I thought he was joking. I said, "Mate, I'm hiring a car." He says, "Oh no, we can't hire you a car unless you've got your vaccine certificate." I said, "Mate, you're kidding. This is a joke, isn't it?" He says, "No, it's true." So I had to go over so I could hop in. So I couldn't hire a car. I could hop in a taxi. Supposedly, and the thing was, remember, this was contrary to all the science, right? If it had been that there was some evidence that if you weren't vaccinated, you were more likely to have the virus and contract it, right? The evidence by now was crystal clear.
Yeah.
That if you were, forget putting aside what the unknown medium-term and long-term risks were, just in that short-term window, if you were injected with the vaccines, you were no more or less likely to get COVID or to transmit it than anyone else in society.
Yeah.
That was what the data was clearly showing. That data was clear out of Israel, because the Israelis, remember, they were Netanyahu called them the Pfizer experiment. They were first out of the blocks, and they had all these great government databases because they thought it was going to work. So they'd set up all these great government databases of age stratifications and how many had been hospitalised and how many hadn't, right? And it showed it didn't work. The data showed, right? And I remember I put that up on and the ABC did this whole segment about how I was wrong, sort of thing, and I'll never forget just on that. Oh, no, crap. That Media Watch program, what a disgrace they were, right?
Yeah.
I put this data up on my page, on my Facebook page. It's a nice little table, so it was easy for people to see, right? So the media did a hit job. Media Watch did a hit job on me because they don't give you an opportunity to reply or to respond, right? They used to do a straight hit job. And what they did, they took the table that I had from my Facebook page and they blurred it. So when they put it up on their screen, you couldn't see what the numbers were. So no one would be able to say, hang on, Kelly's numbers are right here. So they blurred the numbers, and then they had some half-wit supposedly government bureaucrat on the camera. Oh no, it's wrong, without saying how or why, sort of thing. That was what we were putting. This was the nonsense that we were, the rubbish that we were putting up with. The ABC really have the ABC have blood on their hands the way they operated during COVID. Right? Their performance was a disgrace. Right? They went against their charter. They went against all journalistic integrity. That alone shows that organisation, the very time in our society that there was any justification for a government-funded broadcaster was during COVID, because they wouldn't be influenced. They were beyond being influenced by commercial considerations of the big vaccine sellers and the big pharmaceutical companies. Right? They failed that test. So to me, there is no benefit whatsoever of the taxpayers financing the ABC. But getting back to Desmond, right?
Yeah.
What that shows is everyone that, even though we think we didn't succeed, everyone that fought, the reason we were not forced to take 10 shots, the reason those lockdowns are still not going on today, the reason that you don't have to show your vaccine passport when you go to a cafe is because there was enough of us that stood up and fought. And everyone that did should take great pride upon that. Everyone that went to a rally, that protested anyway, that stood up in any particular way, can take great pride, because it's the work that we all did together that stopped that complete madness from continuing going on.
Craig, you're absolutely right. I struggle to make that shift in perspective. But you are right, and I'll buttress what you've just said by something that I hadn't actually even connected these dots until the words basically came out of my mouth. I was talking to someone else who was struggling, and it's an interesting experience. And Craig, I know you've had this as well, to be counseling others and trying to help them through their struggles and trying to give them strength when you don't really have any for yourself. But I found myself in that situation quite a lot, particularly after the release of Battleground Melbourne. We went on the cinema tour with Battleground Melbourne. I talked to people afterwards, and was often sort of, I guess, drawing from an empty well. I'm trying to pour into them and encourage them and help them to see things better. And I'm not sure that I could see things any better than they could. But on this one particular occasion, I actually managed to somehow accidentally say something good. And they were lamenting the fact that, we'd all paid such a high price going to the protest, getting beaten up, getting tear gas, getting arrested, the criminal, in my case, criminal charges, in most people's cases, civil charges, but nevertheless, having to deal with all of that crap. And he said, what was it for? It didn't change anything. And my mind immediately went to the moment when Victoria Police wrote to Premier Daniel Andrews' office and said, it's time to put away the tear gas. In other words, we're not doing the violence anymore. We're not going to keep on beating the crap out of these protesters. And I thought about when that happened, and when that happened was shortly after the shooting at the Shrine, where the police lined up execution squad style, and
I still cannot believe those scenes. I cannot believe that they happened in our country. That was something you'd expect to see in some violent revolution in some Central American country, or the If the military police, did that, if the Chinese police did that against the Uyghurs or against the Hong Kong residents, it would have been plastered all over the front page about an abuse of human rights this was. And yet here it was happening in our own country, and it wasn't as though they were firing upon people, damaging property.
Looting, burning.
Yeah. It was fired in a public park, and people shooting them in the back as they were fleeing across a public park. That was shooting that was going on. And yet, I don't know, I'm getting a bit off subject here. Where was our Human Rights Commission when that happened?
100%.
We've got all these human rights commissioners, all on $500,000 plus a year, that are meant to stand there and meant to defend the human rights of Australians.
Yeah.
And yet when we saw those acts, which were the gross abuses and violations of human rights, right?
Yeah.
The Human Rights Commission were missing in
action. Missing in action. So that day happened, one of the darkest days in Victorian history. And then, because that was essentially day 4 of the CFMEU protests. And like I said before, I'm not necessarily a fan of the CFMEU chapter and all of that. They didn't really care. Most of them, there were people that were with us. So apologies to those people. Thank you for being there. But to the larger CFMEU moment that happened, most of them had not shown up to a single protest until they got the vaccine mandate applied to them. And all of a sudden they cared. And all of a sudden they made the whole thing all about them. And they're out there chanting every day. And me and the other guys who have been keeping this movement alive for 18 months are just we've got our heads in our hands in just complete frustration, because we know that when you go toe to toe with Victoria Police, you're not showing up again to do it again tomorrow. You need a week or two. There's bruises that need to heal. There's like it's like playing a sports match. You don't play rugby and then come back and play it the next day and then come back and play it the next day. You give yourself a week or two in between matches for a good reason. And we understood that from the public's perspective, because they're now watching this happen on the same live streams, Rukshan and Avi and some, my own, etc. They're like, oh, this is the movement. And so in their minds, the CFMEU rookies that were brand new and had no idea what they were doing were now the movement. And so that day when they got shot at the shrine, having promised to be back every day, I knew, and the other experienced guys knew, that if nothing happens tomorrow, we're in serious trouble now. Something has to happen tomorrow because they promised it. And if nothing happens tomorrow, then Victoria Police are going to sit there and say, see, we did it. All we have to do is shoot at them with rubber bullets and they'll run away and they won't come back. And so I got in the car, and saying goodbye to my wife that morning was not easy. I got in the car and I drove to park near the city, knowing that Victoria Police had now done everything except for live ammunition. And having seen on the public reaction to them shooting with rubber bullets, some people, not a huge number, but some people saying, oh, they should have used live ammunition. They should have used real bullets, right? And I parked near the city and I began to scan through all the different streamers' pages, Cafe Lockdown and Anthony Burge and of course, Rukshan and so forth, trying to find someone who had found something that was happening somewhere. We needed something to happen. Something did happen. There was a small thing that happened up in the northern suburbs. I was too far away to get to that, so I stayed in the car and just kept scanning and waiting for something to happen near the city. And in the end, nothing happened near the city, so I ended up just driving home. And honestly, I was relieved, because the last thing I wanted to do was to have to go toe-to-toe again with the cops on that day. But what changed everything, and I look, it's blurry in my head, I'm sort of got a trauma haze over the whole thing, but the thing that changed everything was when the nurses and the teachers staged their silent protests. They wore their uniforms and they wrote on them, and they wrote, this many years in the job and that sort of thing, had the experience that they had. And they stood in parks with masks on, socially distanced, and just wearing their uniforms. And the cops showed up with the riot squad, with the mounted police, with the tear gas canisters, with the rubber bullet guns. And I think even for them, they went, hold on, guys, this doesn't feel right anymore, right? Yeah, okay, we were shooting at the CFMEU guys at at the Shrine of all places, but we were shooting at them, a bunch of young thugs, as they would have liked to have seen us. But now they're confronted by these incredibly courageous nurses and teachers, and they couldn't shoot them. And I think that it was the cumulative effect of all of those things, the 18 months of cat and mouse, of us just being unstoppable, right? They would escalate. They would hit us harder than ever before. They would use new tactics. They brought 2,000 police officers in for one of the protests in Richmond. Twice they had us kettled on that day, and twice we got out again. They did everything, and they finally got to the point where the only thing left was to start killing people. And we still didn't stop. We just morphed again into yet another form. And it was all of that cumulative pain that finally led to them backing down.
Yeah.
And
if
it wasn't for all of that, then all of that would have dragged on for so much longer.
The fact that they had to resort to shooting rubber bullets in the long term shows that we won.
Yeah,
it shows the extremities that to go to. That's there for now. Record history. Just on that, I can remember some in the media the next day, sort of thing, all siding with the police. That was one of the most disgraceful things that I've ever seen. I almost felt physically sick when I did it. But they said, look, everyone said that's why when people, if they're struggling mentally, and you think we didn't achieve anything, well, I'm telling you, we did. And the fact that you are today, that you're not being forced to line up for your 10th shot, shows that we actually eventually have won this. Another thing I'll tell you that we've got going for us, we get to sit back now. I know, was it Schadenfreude is
Schadenfreude, yeah.
Schadenfreude is something we shouldn't rejoice in, but we get now to sit back and watch karma come across these people, right? We get now to sit back and to watch this as every single day there's more evidence rolling in that shows we were right and they were wrong. And karma's going to get these people. Look at Daniel Andrews. Look at what's happening with this boy. Was it the kid he hit on the cycle, right? Sort of all swept under the carpet for years. Was all of a sudden coming. How did the kid expose? Daniels apparently supposedly the kid was going at right angles, exactly at right angles at a high speed, hit the front of the car, and then somehow did a miraculous 90-degree turn, hit the wind. He's being exposed. That's going to come across where. We've seen in the US, we've now got 5 US states suing Pfizer. That's those US state attorney generals. They're pretty serious people. It's not just one state. You've got 5 states, and there'll be more to follow. There's court cases going on all around the world. Just so if you've been suffered and think that we lost, just sit back, watch the news every day about all these people that put all this pain and suffering upon society. I look at Fauci, right? Fauci
he's gone to ground.
He couldn't. The bloke could not safely walk the streets in the US because of what he's done. Barella, even with the Pfizer thing of the CEO of Pfizer, Buller, he's been roasted in those court documents for misleading, deceptive conduct. All these, look, we should just appreciate the success. So we didn't get everything we wanted, but we actually won the battle eventually because we stopped the compulsory nature of these shots. Right? We stopped the lockdowns. I think we've also set a lesson that if they tried this again with the bird flu, right, and they tried to lock down,
totally different,
right, the crowds that we had before will add a 0 onto them, right? So that's what they know. They know they can't do it because we've pushed back and we fought.
Is it perverse of me to kind of hope that they do try it with the bird flu, just because I want them to fuck around and find out? Is that wrong?
No, it's not wrong. You're allowed that. You're allowed so what I'm saying, so my the message of hope that I know often give it to, I think for these things myself is that when you think that you failed and you could have done more and how terrible it was that you were there contributing to a fight. It was a fight of good versus evil, and in many cases pure and utter evil. We know the criminalisation of hydroxychloroquine is no longer there. Ivermectin can be subscribed. Now, a lot of doctors are still front, but can be prescribed without doctors losing their license. So all these battles that we had, we eventually won. And there's a great quote. I don't know if you know the man in the arena. I don't know if you've heard of Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, yes.
Can I read
yes.
This is one thing for anyone that still thinks, we're
Are
struggling.
you going to read the whole thing? I'd love it if you did, because I actually want to pull up another quote, but I'm going to have to play with my phone for a minute.
I've got it. Yeah, okay. It only goes for a minute. Okay, it goes. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the stronger man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, and who, at best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Yeah,
that's the Teddy Roosevelt, I think, was 1905, 1906 or something. That's also a quote that I draw a great inspiration from.
It's beautiful. It's powerful. I came across that actually during COVID. I wasn't aware of it before that. And unfortunately, we don't have any audio recordings from when he gave that speech. That was very early days of recordings and that sort of stuff. It was technically possible at the time, but no one actually did it, unfortunately. And I would love to have heard that read in his voice. I've got something that's a little bit longer, and I need to give a little bit of context for it so that it makes sense. But this is the St. Crispin's Day speech that I referenced in that podcast that you and I did, Joel Jamal's The Ark podcast. And the context for this is that the British Army under Henry V, and this is Shakespeare's Henry V, so it's not an actual original speech from King Henry V. It was written by Shakespeare. They've marched over to France to fight the French, and they find themselves on the eve of a battle, outnumbered about 10-1, and the French have an enormous number of knights and advantages in almost every single respect. And Henry V, who was a man of the people, he was actually, when he was a young man, he was a real troublemaker, and it was thought that he would be a terrible king, but there was something in him that he actually manned up when he took that mantle of king, and he actually became a very decent king, but he was still a man of the people. And he disguised himself and began to walk amongst his men to try and learn their mental state and what sort of an army he was going to be leading into this seemingly hopeless battle the next day. And he hears some of the men talking and saying, we need 10 times this number of men. We need more men, and talking in fear. And he interjects. And so some of what I'm about to read only makes sense within that context, which is why I give you the context. But let me read the whole thing. Because I think it's incredibly powerful, and I think that this is. I've left Lisa's question here. What has been your anchor and hope through it all? And for you, it's been the man in the arena, and that knowledge that you've done the right thing. For me, this is what's becoming. This is where my head is going. So Henry V, St. Crispin's Day speech. Having just heard someone wish for 10 times more men, he says, "What is he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss, and if to live, then the fewer men the greater share of honour. I pray thee, wish not one man more. I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who feeds upon my cost. It yearns me not if men wear my garments, such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it is a sin to covet honour, then I am the most offending soul alive. No, wish not a man from England. I would not lose so great an honour as one man more would share from me. For the best hope I have, oh, do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach for this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company, that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes home safe will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. In that he that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbours and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then he will strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, and yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember with advantages the feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, and may I say Craig Kelly and Rukshan and so many others, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall a good man teach his son. And Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he that today sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ever so vile. This day will gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed that they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispian's Day. And I think that's where I need to get to.
I hadn't heard that before. I hope you feel I said, I think if you look at the long bow of history, we're on the right side, and what Lisa said there, what has been your anchor and hope? I think part of the anchor is that knowing that we had an obligation, the inheritance that we had, the generations of past that had fought for freedoms and made sacrifices far, far, far greater. We were asked to do through this. People that sacrificed their lives, through war, sort of thing. If you look at our sacrifices in context, inconsequential to what they've been through. So, we should be proud of what we've done, proud of what we've achieved, because we have achieved enormous things. As you said, we've set a great precedent that they can. I know. Look, there's laws that we need in place that are going to protect free speech, and this is an ongoing battle. But we are a far, far better place than we were today than during the middle of COVID, because we fought. The globalists or the elitists, they're on. They're plotting again, but they're on retreat in every front. You're likely to see, if Trump is successful in the U.S. presidential, which he looks like to be, there's going to be a lot of retribution there to have. A lot of these state governors, have the power to do things.
Oh yeah.
And as I said, the greatest thing is we get to sit back and we get to watch karma being inflicted upon all these people. And excuse me if that feels a bit of that feels a bit very nasty and rude sort of thing, but I must admit, I do get a bit of pleasure. Like even we saw what the Channel 9 newsroom, Channel 9 News, and that mob pedestrian TV that I put in the media. Basically, like there was one thing they wanted to. They basically, I don't know how I can say it. If this is Channel 9 owned pedestrian media.
Yeah.
A photograph of me up in the media when I was speaking in Parliament, and it's got insert a picture of a dick here. Right? Now, imagine if they did that to some female Greens MP.
Oh no! Can you imagine?
Right. They're sacking half of their staff because no one's listening to the rubbish that they're putting. So those sort of things. We saw the Channel 9 newsroom and the Channel 7 newsroom that were so culpable about not reporting what was happening, being absolutely slaughtered and massacred, and their numbers being cut greatly. We're going to see. We're going to see Daniel Andrews, squirm, over what he's done with this boy bike thing, and that's, I'm sure there's more to come in all these fields. Sort of things. So if you're feeling a bit down and a bit out, think of all these things you got look forward to sit back and get some enjoyment out of.
So what's next for Craig Kelly then? You're not in Parliament at the moment. You've now, correct me if I'm wrong, are you the federal campaign director for One Nation now?
I've got a bit of involvement. The United Australia Party, Clive deregistered the party. After I walked away, forced out, whatever you want to say, resigned from the Liberals, my intention was to sit as an independent member of Parliament and try and hang on to my seat and fight and use that opportunity through being independent in Parliament to use my parliamentary voice to try and protest and raise as many things as I could. That was my goal. I knew it would be extremely difficult to to win my seat as an independent. And then Clive came along, and Clive said, "Look, mate, I appreciate, I respect and admire what you've done. Even if you win as an independent, you're one person in a parliament. There's not really much you can do." He says, "Let's try and go for gold. Let's what Laurie would say. We didn't come here for the silver. We come here for the gold. Let's go for the gold." He said, "Let's run candidates in every one of the 151 seats. Let's run Senate candidates, and let's give it a red hot crack, and we can get a lot of publicity. And that was also one of the great reasons. I've been completely squeezed out of the mainstream media. You couldn't get. We needed basically some very significant money to try and get some advertising through on things. Through newspapers and social media. I was banned from Facebook, but we could pay for Facebook for advertising through United Australia Party, but I couldn't have a Facebook page. Talk about foreign interference in an election. Imagine So here I am. I'm leading a party with 151 candidates in every lower house seat, going to the Australian election, and someone in a foreign country has decided that I can't have a Facebook page, which is a platform.
It's worse than that. Someone in a foreign country, at the behest of the Australian government and your competitors, have decided that you can't have a Facebook
That's
page.
Right. Yeah. That was foreign election. So we needed the dollars to break all that. And that's why I went along with Clive. We gave it our best shot. It didn't work for a lot of reasons, but we gave it a shot. And I think, as Clive said in his speech the other night, he says, it cost me. So I spent $110 million or something, and he worked out that was $20 for every Australian that didn't get injected. He said, "That's the best money I've ever spent." He said.
Well, good on him. I tell you, good on him.
So that's done and dusted sort of thing. So the reality is in federal politics there's only room. It's very difficult for multiple parties, on the right. So at the moment I'm working with One Nation. Hopefully I can. Hopefully they'll see and give me a Senate spot here a chance to run the Senate here in New South Wales. It's going to be tough, not easy. In the media, in the meantime, I do as much commentary and bits and pieces I can on social media. And just see where just like in life, you always find if the door's open, one door closes, another door opens, sort of thing. And the best thing someone once told me, if you're doing the wrong thing at the wrong time at the wrong place, bad things happen to you. Right? But if you want to get a bit of good luck, he says, just try and do the right thing at the right time in the right place, and that's when Lady Luck will shine upon you.
Well, I have to somewhat disagree. I've certainly tried to do the right thing, and I've tried to do that in the place that I was in the time that I was given, and I can't say I've had an awful lot of luck up to this point in time. But hopefully,
you're still in there. You're still fighting. You're still. You're highly. Look at this opportunity. You're highly respected. If you look before COVID period, your notoriety, if you want to say it, is there's a lot of people that know you and love you and respect of you that would never heard of you without this COVID period. And you're required. There's still battles going on. We've still got this battle against. There's the digital ID. There's the misinformation bill coming up. All these battles are still ahead of us. There's this nonsense of net zero. We're trying to. We're going to cull the dairy herds and the beef herds and attack our farmers. These are all still fights that we have ahead. So we need you fit, and we need you strong, and we need you focused to keep going on these battles that we have ahead of us, sort of thing.
Well, I appreciate it, Craig, but this is not something I've said publicly previously, but I'm debating how much longer I can keep doing it.
Yeah. Oh, look, I feel exactly the same. Sometimes I feel, wouldn't it be easy just to throw the feet up and sit in the backyard and sit in front of an open fire and burn a bit of wood and gaze off into the bush, But what do you say? We're enlisted for the duration of the war, right? And the war's still going. We're still required to fight whatever that, whatever aspect that that we fight in, sort of thing, whether that's as full frontal or something, or in the background or something. We're still needed in that fight, and I said that we should celebrate, celebrate the successes that we've had, and as I said to everyone listening on this thing, realize that we have achieved great things together. Yeah, we have Daniel Andrews is Daniel Andrews is gone, Berejiklian has gone, Palaszczuk has gone, McGowan's gone. They're all Morrison has gone. They're all gone. I had like a bingo card sort of thing, and the only one left on my bingo card, Hazard has gone here in New South Wales. The only one left on my bingo card that hasn't gone is Trudeau in Canada. Right? And he looks
we've got to get him.
He looks as though he's lined up there. Ardern's gone. Right? All these people are gone.
Macron
right?
gone.
Yeah. So, so we should, as I said, we should be celebrating the successes that we had.
Yeah.
We should be celebrating that because of what we did, there's little chance they could ever do this again. Right? And we've got to steel ourselves for the ongoing fight that's ahead of us. And what I said, the best part of it, we get to sit back and we get to watch karma inflicted upon all these people.
Yeah, and look, it's a nice phase now. The price has largely been paid in terms of all the COVID stuff, but with the economy having turned the way it has, I've had to do a bit of a realistic stock take and realize that I just can't keep working for free anymore. So have to figure out what that means. And it was good. The period of time where I had some backing and I had the Aussie Wire was wonderful for the family. And I think that was really actually a bit jarring for me because it really brought into sharp focus the degree to which, I've often reflected on how much income I've missed out on as a result of being Topher for 15 years. If you add it up compared to the career trajectory that I was on previously and what I would have earned versus what I have earned the last 15 years, I've lost somewhere between 800 and a million, 800,000 and a million, somewhere in there in lost income over the last 15 years. And I kind of went, yeah, but I'm willing to pay that price. And then as I was actually earning some good money for a year while I was with the Aussie Wire, I saw how much that transformed the living situation for my wife and my kids. And I realized I'm not the one missing out. It's actually them.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question I'm facing now, in addition to the healing that needs to go on, all of that, and I've not talked about this publicly before, and it's obviously a difficult thing to say, is I either need to figure out how I can do this in good conscience and be able to look my wife and kids in the eye and know that they're not paying the price, or I need to stop.
Look,
and I probably need to figure that out this year.
Yeah, look, one thing I'd say, how old are your kids?
8, 4, and 1.
Okay, they're at this stage too young to understand it. Okay, in the years ahead, they're going to have the chance to look back at this period of history and look at what their dad did, and the pride that they're going to get, and the respect that they're going to have for you are going to be something that you can't put monetary value on.
True.
Right now, okay. Maybe you've got to have a break for a couple of years, and put a few dollars, put a few dollars in the kitty, and give the kids as much as you can, sort of thing. And maybe it's you have 5 years, you have 6 years, 7 years. Then you have some time off and come back in the fight, because the battle against these when I say these tyrants, this totalitarian ideology that we are facing, that there's these globalists that think that they're elite and they want to control, these technocrats want to control how we think, that this is going to be an ongoing fight, right? It's going to be going on long after you and I have gone, sort of thing, right? So your legacy is ultimately important. You've achieved that. Your kids will be able to look back with great pride. So if you do need to have some time off, there's plenty of us there to fill your shoes and can keep the war going, sort of thing. And you look after, you do as much as you can to look after the kids, but ultimately never be, as I said, geez, they're going to be proud in the years to come when they can look back at the things you've done.
Yeah, and there's comfort in that. There is comfort in that, no question. And it's a funny thing. When I was younger, I really wanted to join the army because I had 2 older brothers who were in the army, and of course, I grew up as the youngest of 5 boys, and being the youngest of boys, you want to prove that you're better than them, and you want to prove that you can do something. And so I decided I was going to join the 2 commandos down in Williamstown. They're a reserve commando unit. And so I went, joined the army, got through recruit course, ended up parading with 5-6 RVR in it's just an infantry unit because I couldn't go direct into the commandos. And after 2.5 years, I won't go into the story, but gosh, our army reserve is an absolute disaster. They literally lost the entire battalion's training records at one point. We all had to start again because they didn't know who had done what, and they couldn't take our word for it. They just an absolute clusterfuck. Anyway, after 2.5 years of beating my head against that brick wall, I ended up leaving for having never become a commando, having only ever been an infantry soldier, never deployed or anything like that. And there was a real sense of unfinished business for me because I needed to prove to my older brothers, and in truth, really prove to myself that I had what it took to become that Green Beret, to be that person, right? And that sense of unfinished business stayed with me. And then it was sometime, I don't know, late 2021, early 2022, I realized that sense of unfinished business was gone. And I realized that had happened because whatever that itch was, whatever that thing was that I felt like I needed to prove to myself, I had now proved. And I would wake up every day knowing that I'd faced one of the toughest tests, certainly outside of a war zone, that you could really face. Think about the money that was spent on trying to deceive us. Think about how many voices were opposed to us. Think about how much pressure, physical violence, the risk of physical injury, arrest, imprisonment, having your life ruined, all of that. I'd faced that test and I'd passed it. And so in a really amazing way, that scratched that itch, that need to prove that I was a man, to prove that I could do something like that. And so in a funny way, I think psychologically it would be possible for me to move on in a way that I couldn't have if COVID hadn't happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To say, well, I've now fought my war. Now I'm going to go home and look after the kids.
Yeah.
And go and metaphorically buy the farm and settle down and do that. Now the truth is, if I actually did that for a few years, I think the itch, not the itch of needing to prove myself, I think that's done and dusted, but the desire to speak, I despair at the quality of journalism in this country. Not that I'm a journalist, I'm a commentator, and there's an important distinction there, but I despair at what passes for journalism. And so I don't think I'd be able to keep my mouth shut forever, even if I did take some time off. But I also feel as though, I think what's difficult for me is I'm almost unemployable now. After 15 years of this game, and all the things I've done and said and everything else, I think I'm borderline unemployable. Maybe as a forklift driver or something like that, I could go back to doing that perhaps. And so there's then the problem of, okay, well, I could go and take a minimum wage job or maybe even a median wage job and go and work, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But at that point, I've missed out on 15 years of career development, and I'm not making use of 15 years of whatever it is that I do. And so again, thinking about and prioritizing the family and prioritizing the kids and prioritizing being able to be there for them and give them something that, and my wife as well, just figuring out what's the right choice. Maybe the right choice is to persevere, but actually ironically, to become the person that all my haters accuse me of being, which is a grifter. They're all like, oh, you're just trying to sell books and sell DVDs. You're just trying to rip everybody off, for money. Maybe I continue, but I actually just be more mercenary, and I actually just have a stronger focus on, hey, I'm sorry. I'd love to continue to be the nice guy that does everything for free, but actually I need to get paid now. I don't know. I'm processing all of that now. And really my litmus test is what's best for the family. Not that worried about me, not that worried about Topher, not that worried about anything else. The family have paid an enormous price in order for me to be Topher for the last, 10 years since I got married, and 8 years since Winston was born. And certainly the last 4 years, it's taken a terrible, terrible toll. And I hadn't realized until recently. And so now I've got to just reconsider what I do from here and what's best for them.
Well, another thing I think you should just have a perspective of. Yes, you've got your family to look after in the narrow context of your family's life, but you've also got to consider what type of country that your kids are going to inherit, right? And do you want them to live up in a society where you will own nothing and you'll be happy? You want them to grow up you will eat the bug. You want them to grow up in a society where whatever the next big pharma decides whatever they want to inject into their body, they're forced to do so. So you're fighting not only for your family in the narrow context, you're fighting in a much broader context as well about the type of nation that they are going to grow up into and the kind of nation that they're going to inherit. And that's something that you should look back and take. I know you can't put a monetary value on these things, right? But, don't forget that that's also what you've been fighting for and what you've helped achieve.
Yeah, and that's true, and I appreciate that, and I haven't lost sight of that. I don't want anyone to think that I'm in some terrible place. I'm not, but I am reassessing and having to, just heal from all of what's happened, because I think I tried until the second half of 2022, I think it was, before I really began to actually even recognize the wounds that I was carrying, much less try and do anything about them. That probably wasn't really until the middle of last year. And I've made some good progress since then. I've lost a chunk of weight. I've been in a better.
By the way, too, I know what the secret is. You might be able to share the secret. There you go. Maybe Topher's weight loss books or sort of something.
No, all I did was jump on the bandwagon. I haven't gone full carnivore, but I've shifted away from carbs and towards a lot more proteins, and I eat 2 meals a day instead of 3, and that's kind of it. You just do that and let enough time pass, and the weight just kind of slowly comes away.
The carbohydrates are the things that get to us, sort of thing.
The problem is, I love my carbs. I love nothing more than a massive, hearty Italian, pasta meal, and the food coma that you get afterwards is so good. I just love it. Anyway, so Craig, you seem to be in a headspace where the fight itself kind of spurs you on. Just sort of processing what you've said and your outlook looking forward and so forth. There's something about the fight itself that I don't know, keeps you kind of it's like you were born for the fight.
Yeah. Look, sometimes you think you want to sit back and wouldn't life be nice and easy if there was nothing to fight for, sort of thing. But there is what we've got is worth protecting. We've inherited it. I also say in Parliament that remember the Australian Parliament House, the alignment. If you go from this where the Speaker sits, right, and you got the very middle of Parliament House. If you open all the doors up, right, it's in perfect alignment down across the top of Old Parliament House, down Anzac Parade, right up to the wall. So the symbolism of that is that every time that you go through those front doors of Parliament House, that you look back and there's that war memorial that means the sacrifices that previous generations have made to give us the freedoms and liberties and the wealth that we enjoy today. Because remember, in the long span of history, that's even with everything, the freedoms that we enjoy today have only been, it's only been a wafer thin, minority that have been able to enjoy those freedoms.
It's true.
So
it's true.
We do have an obligation to, to fight and protect them. I said, sometimes you think you live in the jungle and still fight that war, but there's, it is what I say. It's a never-ending battle. What was Reagan's great quote? He says,
Freedom is never more. Freedom is not passed to your descendants in the blood. It is never more than one generation away from extinction.
That's it. They're never extinction sort of thing. So we've got to keep fighting for it to, you know, and that is some of the greatest things that we can pass on for society.
Yeah.
And
the way that sorry.
Go, yeah.
The way that I say it is, the history can be viewed as a continuous battle between those who want to be free and those who want to rule. Yeah. And the battle for freedom was going on long before I was born, and it will continue long after I'm dead. Yeah. And all I get to do is decide what I do with the time that I'm given. Let me throw another little spanner in the works, because this plays heavily in my thinking, and it's a story I've told a few times. So I apologize to those of you that have been following me for a while and you've heard this. But Craig, I'd be surprised if I've told you this one. I was in Venezuela in 2015. Now, this is at the time when they had inflation of about 10,000% per annum. It was the most dangerous city. Caracas was the most dangerous city on earth outside of a war zone. You had to go to Iraq to get to a more dangerous place. Yep. Went there for a friend's wedding because I'm crazy. And
I remember this. I remember part of the story. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing city. Reminds me of Melbourne in so many ways. You can just see that there used to be money there. The architecture is beautiful. There's great food culture if you've got money. There's great music culture. And we went to a jazz bar, and we were sitting in this basement jazz bar, and I got chatting to an older Venezuelan chap who had enough English that we could talk. And he pretty quickly figured out that I wasn't one of the socialists. And he began to tell me about when the revolution happened and how hard he worked and how hard his networks, his people worked to try and stop the communist takeover from happening. They campaigned and they did rallies and they did all the things. And he said, I gave everything to that fight. And what I didn't do was have a plan B in case we lost. And he went on to tell me about his son, who had previously had a business, but that business had become impossible under all the regulations and everything else. And he hadn't been able to run his business, and he wasn't able to get a job. And he was just basically unemployed now and had kind of almost lost the will to live. His grandson, who was still a child, but was actually growing up with the pot belly that comes with malnutrition because of the effects of malnutrition. And the whole family would band together to try and scrounge good food for the kid. And the kid got priority over everybody else, and yet was still growing up malnourished. And I remember his face and seeing the face of a man who, rightly or wrongly, feels the guilt of having betrayed his kids. And I swore in that moment that I would never be that man. But there's a balancing act there, because in order to not be that man, you've got to know when discretion is the better part of valor. And it doesn't mean the fight is lost necessarily, but it means that the wise thing for you is to step away from that fight and to focus elsewhere for the sake of your kids, for the sake of your family. And so that's a lesson that I have kind of ever in front of my face, is I never want to put myself in a situation where I'm old and I feel the weight of having let my own kids down. So then it's a case of that priority between, does that mean fighting for my country and the country in which my kids live? Or does that mean stepping away from that fight and fighting for my kids individually and my family?
Look, I understand how you feel. And it's also to say again, there's an overlap, between the two. And if it is that you have to, not lay down your sword, but put your sword in the cupboard, for a couple of years, and and be there. As your kids are growing up, sort of thing. So be it, sort of thing. There's plenty of time to pick up the sword and fight again. And I'm sure that in years to come, that the guy in Venezuela, they've been through the terrible scourges of socialism. And just remember, we had all those Greens and all those MPs that wanted to bring Chavez out to Australia.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Chavez got to publish an op-ed in, I think it was in the Age of Sydney Morning Herald.
That's right. Tell you how wonderful how wonderful the socialist revolution was there, as they as they destroyed the wealth of the country.
Yep.
He was a hero to many of these nutcases that are still there, running the place here in Australia.
Amazing.
Amazing experience to go there and just see that how great wealth can be destroyed. One thing I've done like that. I once was in Beirut, about 2001 or something, maybe 2002. And as you went from the airport, you could still see a lot of buildings that were very badly damaged by the war.
Yeah.
There's a downtown area. I think it's pronounced Juni or something like that. I don't know if my Lebanese pronunciation is correct. And there was a photographic exhibition that they had there at night. And it showed the photographs. It was during the war, and it was exactly the same location, either before or after. So you could see how society, how they'd restored it to what it was, how it used to be. So it showed you how society had collapsed.
Yeah.
And I think back to how are those people sitting there looking at in the original photos to ever think that your society could collapse to that extent, that you had such destruction going on. And that's what we have to remember, that how fragile our society actually is.
Yeah.
It's not this thing that just goes on and on and on by itself.
It's a veneer. Civilization is a veneer. It's just a layer that looks pretty.
Yep.
And unfortunately, what's happening at the moment is, if you can put a veneer over the top of a solid timber door because you want the look of that veneer, that's fine. You've got a solid timber door behind it. But if that solid timber door is getting eaten by white ants, then over time there's less and less substance, and the veneer might still be really pretty.
Yeah.
But there's less and less there. And that's what I am concerned is happening in Western civilization around the world, not just in Australia. At the moment. That it still looks pretty. And this was the jarring thing about Caracas City. And it really changed my wife's perspective. She was supportive of my political stuff, but she was noticeably different when we got back from Venezuela. And what I think was really jarring was if you just lifted your eyes away from the bread lines, because there were literally lines of people that would stretch multiple blocks waiting to get into a shop to try and buy butter in the hope that they wouldn't have run out. It was mind blowing. If you just lifted your eyes above that, you saw beautiful architecture. The sun was shining. There's birds in the trees. There's cars passing you going down the street. There's not so many people out walking their dogs because most of those had been eaten. But that was probably the only thing that was noticeably missing. Was the existence of pets. Pets didn't exist anymore.
And the zoo. They ate all the animals in the zoo.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They became the weight loss champions of the world. The only other country that might compete with them would be North Korea, but we don't have enough data to say for sure. I think on average, the average weight of a Venezuelan had dropped by over 25 pounds from when the revolution happened. So it's like sort of 12, 11 kilos thereabouts, something like that. And what was jarring was how normal you could convince yourself that it was if you just ignored a few key things. And then going into Melbourne CBD during the lockdowns, I had this intense deja vu, this incredibly intense deja vu with my time in Caracas City, because the architecture was still there. And there was still an occasional tram rattling past you down the street. You could, if you chose to, and there are people doing it right now with Melbourne. There are people, oh, Melbourne's back, baby. No, it is not. Go and take an honest look. Walk down the street at night and actually just be honest with yourself. Is this, there are streets, the Swanston Street Walk or the Burke Street Mall, you couldn't move. Like you were weaving continuously between people that were standing and looking at shop windows or coming the other way or what have you. And now you've got plenty of room. It's not like the streets are empty, but they are not full. There are empty shop fronts everywhere. And people are like, oh, it's back, baby. I'm like, no, you're doing exactly what I observed in Caracas City, right? You can convince yourself of that, but that's not the reality.
Victoria, all the data is quite alarming about the direction Victoria is heading in. I think one of the most things was, look, even though house prices house price inflation is not great, for the country, but the worst thing, if you live in an area where house price inflation is not occurring, and that's what we've seen in Melbourne. I think the average since COVID, I think your average property price, if Melbourne had have kept pace with the rest of the country, it's like $150,000 on the average place worse off.
Wow.
What has happened. You've got this.
That's because of people like me leaving.
Yeah, you've got people leaving. You've got the entrepreneurial, people with entrepreneurial drive are getting out of the place. You've got this continual spending on unproductive, assets, waste of capital that's not producing anything. You've got this madness of the what's it called, the city rail loop, or what's it called, the rail loop?
Don't get me started. Yep.
200 billion worth of expenditure. All that, you got the desalination plant. You got all this money being wasted on renewables.
That was the very first video I ever did. I became Topher for the desal plant. $1.4 billion white elephant. And now $1.4 billion looks like chump change.
That's right.
Looks like nothing.
So all this money is being spent in unproductive assets. Means it doesn't get a return, which means the wealth of the place is lower. Like, your great advantage there in Victoria used to be that you had the lowest energy costs in Australia, and Australia had some of the lowest energy costs in the world. So so Melbourne was this great manufacturing hub. It's all dead and gone. What's your competitive advantage at the moment? Dairy and agriculture. Okay, they're coming for that with net zero.
Correct.
All those farting dairy cows, like we've got to take real action on climate change and kill stop all those cows from farting. So we've got to cull those herds.
Well, Victoria. Sorry.
Where's the wealth? Gas, you can't. There's no bans on exploration for gas. What's going to create the wealth in the state?
So, unfortunately, I came to the conclusion that Victoria is now the California of Australia. And it doesn't even have the one good thing about California, which is the weather. Now, California, for those that may not be aware, is a one-party state, has been for a number of decades now. Victoria, I would argue, is a one-party state. The Liberal Party, since Jeff Kennett, have only won one election at the Victorian state level. And arguably, I actually helped them to win that election. I won't tell that story, but it'll probably come up in Mansfield in 2 days' time. So if you want to hear that story, come to Mansfield. They won it by a single seat, and I helped a candidate to get a lot of votes that they then passed as preferences, and that's what won the Liberals that particular seat that they weren't expected to win. And so it's a one-party state, stupendous amounts of debt. The spending is structural, so it's not going to be easy for them to get the budget under control. And being a one-party state, the incentives shift. When you've got two major parties, preferably in an ideal world, there'd be a lot more than that, but let's just say two. There is an incentive for them to try and appeal to that middle. If they get too extreme, people vote for the other guy. Once it becomes a one-party state, there's no real fear that the other team are going to win the election. It's a given that you're going to win the election. The question now, the competition, is who's going to lead the party. And that's about appealing to the party faithful, which means you get rewarded for going more extreme. So once you become a one-party state, your progress or regression in the direction that party wants to take you accelerates, because now the system is rewarding extremity, not moderation. That's exactly what we're seeing in Victoria. We saw that with Daniel Andrews. We're seeing that now with Jacinta Allen and the decisions that she's making. I've left. I got my family out of Victoria. We considered leaving Australia. Sorry?
So that was the best thing you probably could have done.
Yeah. It's been a wonderful thing. We didn't go to another major city. We've gone to a small regional center. That's been a great thing for the family. And anyway, lots to navigate there. I'm mindful of the time. You've been amazingly gracious. Thank you so much. What is it now? It's 20 past 10, and we've still got 1,278 people watching across all the platforms live right now, and there'll be tens of thousands will be watching later. So, Craig, you're an absolute champion. Thank you so much. I'm so very grateful.
Just finish off. So, mate, keep your head up. right? I know exactly the mental space that you're in at the moment and how hard it's been, right? Take great pride in what you've achieved, right? Because you have been, you have been part, totalitarianism, medical fascism came to this country, and there was a small group of people that said, "Not on my watch," and you were one of them. And we've basically, we haven't defeated them thoroughly, but I tell you what, they are in retreat, and the plans that they had for us, we thwarted the worst of the plans that they had for us.
Yeah.
And every day you can see more and more the science, the data, the evidence is all on our side, and we're continuing to make advances every single day, right? And as I said, you're going to get in the days and the weeks and the months and the years to come, we're going to sit back and we're going to watch karma unfold upon these people, right? They're all going to get it. That's one thing I've known, that karma eventually catches up with them, and we can see that with Daniel Andrews at the moment. We get back and we get a great show that'll give us a lot of excitement to watch that sort of thing. And if you do need to take a couple of years out to look after your kids, I said, remember, your kids always remember. They can look back and they'll grow up and see the great work that you did and appreciate and have enormous respect for you, because it wasn't just your kids you were fighting for; it was other Australians, sort of kids, sort of thing. So, mate, hang in there. Whatever you do, you'll have the love and respect from, I'm sure, from tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of Australians.
Well, much appreciated, Craig, and right back at you. Thank you for all that you've done, the hits that you took during COVID, and just being, honestly, for someone like myself, I know a lot of people say to me that I helped keep them sane. You and a very small number of other people helped keep me sane. You were one of the ones that I looked
people
at.
come up to me in the streets and say, "Look, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be alive today." Right? And I'm sure, people would say that to you as well, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because,
No
you've
doubt.
You've got to be able to stand up and speak out when you need. Otherwise, what's the point? I says there's that man in the arena speech. Those that watch it, print it out.
Go back and watch the replay. Yeah.
Print it out and put it up on your wall, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there's one other. I'm going to finish on with one other just quick note.
Sure.
I had another close friend in the media that was a bit down at the moment, and thought, should I go back to keep fighting, sort of thing, or I sent him the photograph of Teddy Sheehan. If you know the story, it's from the War Memorial. Teddy Sheehan was an 18-year-old sailor on board the HMAS Armidale, and it was doing a trip from Darwin, 1942. First end of November. Was doing a trip from Darwin to Timor to pick up some troops and bring them back to Darwin, sort of thing, as they were trying to evacuate Timor. And on the way back, got spotted by Japanese Zeros and dive bombers. They attacked it. It got hit by the dive bombers. Torpedoes went off. They said it hit the ship. The ship's going down. They said there was 150 on board. 50 were killed in the attacks. There's 100 sailors trying to clamber on board life rafts, and as they are, the Japanese Zeros have come back down to try and shoot them in the water. Right? So Teddy Sheehan's got off the lifeboat, got back on board the vessel as it's sinking down, strapped himself into his machine gun, and they said it was firing, kept on firing, even as he went under the water. Right? And they said they could see the tracer bullets coming up from under the water as he went under, sort of thing. So that's also a great image that should be shown in every school, that gives me great inspiration from that. Previous generations of Australians have sacrificed and much more than will ever be asked to do, sort of thing. So
yeah. No, that's very true, and it puts things in perspective, because the truth is we do stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of the generations that came before us and have given us so much to be grateful for. I'm going to be cheeky and do one last thing here, which is that if I'm going to be accused of being a grifter, I might as well give it a go. So I'm going to put in the Good People Break Bad Laws website. So it's just www.goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. That should pop up in the chat on YouTube, Facebook, and on X, or certainly YouTube and Facebook. I don't know about X. But goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. If you don't have a copy of my book, go get one. You can get hoodies like this one or T-shirts. So this is too much 1984, not enough 1776. It's one for my American fans, but I think it's pretty universal. It's most people around the world understand what I'm talking about there. And look, I'd really appreciate a bit of support, a bit of love, and I'll sort of factor that into my thinking as I just decide which way do I go. I'm going to do whatever I believe is best for my family. That's a given. But I'm not sure yet what that is, and I'm open to being influenced, I guess. If people want me to keep doing this, well, I'm happy to keep doing it, but I just need to find a way to make it not come at the expense of my family. That's really all I'm trying to do now, is look after them, and I'd love to do this and look after them at the same time. But if I have to choose, I'm going to look after them.
Mate, all the best. There's no worry. I hope there's nothing to be ashamed of or frightened of about promoting. The people that call you grifters are often these people that are well and truly entrenched in some public service job that are getting money on the side, and plus money on the side from all these big pharmaceutical corporations. So there's nothing wrong with people sharing the love around. If you want to get a warm jacket or something, buy one of those, or go and buy your book. Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Craig. Really appreciate all that you've done, your generosity with your time tonight, and this has been a really wonderful chat. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please make sure you leave a comment if you haven't already, share this around, let people know, and tune in for another Topher Field podcast in due course. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Topher. All the best.